Hello, everyone. Welcome. So nice to be here with you. My name is Christopher Pepper. I'm a health education teacher on special assignment with San Francisco Public Schools. I also write the best-selling Substack newsletter, Teen Health Today, and I'm the co-author of the book, Talk to Your Boys. And I'm so glad to be here with you today to welcome you to this session, which is called Doing Better for Boys. And we have a terrific panel who I'm going to introduce to you in just a second. The idea for this panel is that many boys and young men today are struggling at school, in their families, and in their communities. They have to try and form their own identities while encountering some very potent cultural forces, both online and off. We're here for a candid conversation about what boys experience day to day, how they're being affected, and what we can do to help them. Let's meet our panelists. Ashanti Branch is the founder and executive director of the Ever Forward Club, the author of Diary of a Confused Educator, and the driving force behind the Million Mask movement. His group facilitates young men's health groups in San Francisco Public Schools. Let's welcome Ashanti. Jason Nagata is an associate professor of pediatrics in the Division of Adolescent and Young Adult Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. He is an expert in eating disorders, particularly in boys and men, and has published over 400 articles in academic journals. Please welcome Jason. And Mike Robb is the head of research at Common Sense Media. His team has recently published 2 research studies related to today's topic, Boys in the Digital Wild, which focuses on boys' online lives, and Betting on Boys, which focuses on gambling. Welcome, Mike. All right, we're going to get right into it. We have a tight 45 minutes. We will have time for questions and answers toward the end of our conversation, and we're going to do an activity together at the end. So, Mike, Common Sense Media has recently done some research that's very relevant to our conversation today. Set the scene for us by summarizing some of the key findings in your report, Boys in the Digital Wild.
Sure. Thank you all for being here today. I know there's a lot, and everyone just went from panel to panel, so if anyone needs to get up and stretch or just stand in the back of the room, I totally get it. I would do the same. Thank you for the question. So we did a report like in the summer of 2025, focused specifically on adolescent boys between the ages of 11 to 17. We were very interested in learning about boys online, their digital lives. And what we found, probably not so shocking, is that it's a mix, right? There's a lot of things that are happening online. Some surprising, some not so surprising. If you ask kids directly, you ask these boys directly, they will tell you that on their online social media platforms and in their gaming, they find a sense of belonging, right? So 58% of teen boys say like that is a place where they feel a sense of belonging, a place where they feel like they can say what they want to say and be heard by other people who are like them. So that's good. And you want to have a place online where you can feel supported. But we also asked a series of questions about the kinds of content that they were seeing online. And we asked about 12 different kinds of content that were basically kind of masculine coded, more associated, I think, with boys and men. And these are things about, for example, working out, about like having a side hustle and making money, gambling, content about violence, and weapons and guns, 12 different things. And what we found was that boys are really awash in this digital masculinity content. So 73%, almost 3/4 of boys say that they regularly encounter that kind of content when they are online through social media feeds, through YouTube, through other things like that. We had a subset of that content which really focused much more on what we would call problematic digital masculinity, and problematic in the sense that it was reinforcing gender stereotypes. So things like, girls only want to date certain kinds of guys, guys who are very tall, who are rich, things like that. Or girls can get whatever they want just, because of how they look. So kind of these really problematic gender stereotypes. And 69% of boys, so, just slightly more than 2/3 said that they were regularly seeing that kind of problematic digital masculinity content. Not great. The other thing that we really honed in on was we had several indices of well-being. So we asked about loneliness, we asked about self-esteem, And for those kids who had the highest levels of exposure to digital masculinity content and the problematic digital masculinity content were also the boys who said that they were lonelier, more likely to say that they were lonely, or have low self-esteem, for example, or adhere to more traditional masculine norms. So these are the kinds of things that we were looking at, and I think that really sets the scene for what it's like and the kinds of content that boys are seeing online.
And I read that report. I was a advisor on this report.
Thank you for that.
And so I read it before it came out, and then after it came out, and we had some discussions about that. And people are really looking for advice. So did you pair that with any advice for adults who read those findings and then are a little bit alarmed about what their kids might be seeing online?
We had this incredible advisor. His name was Chris Pepper. He's sitting 3 chairs over from me, and coincidentally, he has written a fantastic book called Talk to Your Boys. And my recollection of the process is, we had some parent recommendations about, the conversations you could have, even just kind of going in open-minded. You use a great term, be curious, not furious, which is a term, I said that right, curious, not furious, is a term I have appropriated for myself, mostly with attribution. I will try to be better about that. We want as a parent to just go open-minded. What are you seeing online? Or even just show me. Can you kind of show me, allay my fears? If you want to just show me what you're seeing on TikTok or Instagram. A lot of kids are really happy to talk about technology use. They may not want to talk at the dinner table about how their day was or what's going on in school, but talking about tech is something lots of kids actually like to do. And that was, something that we tried to address in the report. But I would love to turn it back to you if you want to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that you gave to us about how to open up those conversations with boys.
Okay. I'm the moderator, so I'll do this real quickly because I'm not... I didn't know he was going to do that. But I think a lot of people are sort of missing a key part of parenting in the digital age because we see kids get their phones and they go off to their room and they close the door, they put on headphones, they go on their video games, they've got on their headphones. It is hard to access what's going on in their world. It is way different than when the phone was attached to the wall and you could hear at least half of the conversation, or when the TV was in the living room and everyone was watching it together, and if something came on, you could comment on it because everybody was watching the same thing. So you have to work. That's where the curiosity part comes in. I don't think it helps to come in from a point of view of fear, from a really scared perspective. I don't think that's a great place to start. Be curious. Hey, can you show me what you're looking at today? Or, I heard you were laughing so much. What's so funny? Have them explain it to you. Be actually interested in what they're interested in. And then you're looking for any kind of entryway, any moment to connect. And that could be a billboard that you're passing. Many parents have good luck in a car together where you're not looking at each other, but you're sitting side by side. And you can have a brief conversation. Often, it's a 1-minute talk. It's usually not an hour-long lecture. So you're looking for lots of 1-minute talks where you can have some kind of discussion and so encouraging some critical thinking. And you can share your values. And if you make a mistake, it is okay. You can go back the next day and say, I said this thing yesterday and I was thinking about it and I didn't really say it the right way. Can I try again? Take those opportunities. You just want to keep the connections open. And I think a lot of people lose their boys as they get into the tween and teen years, that the boys shut the door and the parents stop knocking on that door. And we need to keep knocking, keep taking those opportunities to connect with them. So thank you for that opportunity to share some ideas. I really encourage people to check out that Common Sense report. It's got a lot of good data.
So much data. If you like stats and numbers, help yourself.
And I want to turn now to Jason. So you've done a lot of research on the rise of eating disorders among adolescent boys. Can you tell us what's going on with boys and body image and behavior change?
Yeah, thanks so much for covering this in the panel today. I do think that there's still a stereotype that eating disorders exclusively affect teenage girls. And similarly in the media space, a lot of even in these lawsuits and legislation, a lot of the focus has really been on potential linkages between social media and girls' body image. And I do think that boys have been somewhat left out of the conversation, which is why it's so important that this Common Sense report has come out. And to supplement that, other studies have also found that boys actually are using social media in kind of different and distinct ways than girls. So boys are actually more likely than girls to allow for public followings on social media. Male selfies are actually more likely to show their full body, like in all their muscles, as opposed to just their face. And studies on Instagram use in teenage boys have actually shown that that is linked with higher muscularity-related behaviors, even use of anabolic steroids. And so I think a lot of the content is more on the lines of like fitness and fitness influencers, and then even some of these appearance and performance-enhancing substances and drugs, which I think oftentimes get lost in some of the discussions we have about some of the pro-eating disorder or anorexia content.
So for people who are just kind of learning about this or hadn't really thought about eating disorders in boys that much before, and they have a young person at home, they have an adolescent boy, what should they be watching out for? What are kind of red flags that you should definitely pay attention to?
Yeah, so eating disorders are very complex because they involve mental health and physical health and the intersection. And I also want to just mention that, some of the content like physical activity and exercise is actually good in moderation for your health. But I think, to me, where things become a disorder, or when you should consider like warning signs or red flags, are when some of these physical activity or exercise or eating really starts to lead to preoccupations or even obsessions in ways that are worsening young people's qualities of life, leading to impairment in schoolwork. Some of the young guys that I take care of basically spend all of their free time at the gym working out, and it kind of displaces social relationships. So I think at the point that it is leading to worse quality of life, impairing relationships and schoolwork or regular work if they're in the workforce, those are all times when we're sort of going into the disordered territory.
And it sounds like to do that, you have to be paying attention to your kids and be kind of dialed in pretty closely.
Yeah, so I do think that there is sort of a slippery slope, kind of similar, I guess, with eating disorder content. Unfortunately, dieting and weight loss behaviors are pretty common among teenage girls. Not all of them will develop a full-blown eating disorder. And I think similarly with guys, exercise, fitness is very common, and only a small percentage will develop a full-blown eating disorder. But I do think that we need to be checking in with our boys and young men.
Thank you. Ashanti Branch. So you started the Ever Forward Club when you were a teacher, and you were seeing some boys having some issues in your class. Can you tell us about what caused you to start this club and what that initial impetus was?
So I was a first-year teacher. I left the engineering career to become a teacher. Don't do it if you're thinking about it. It wasn't Ashanti's plan. Ashanti wanted to be rich, but this some voice was saying you're supposed to be a teacher, and so I went to Mills College. I got to my teaching credential. I went to San Lorenzo High School teaching math. I love math. I'm an undercover nerd, and I had so many young men in my class who hated math, and so therefore, since I was the recipient of the deliverer of math, they hated me, and so I was like, look, I'm not your enemy. You need this class to graduate high school. There's a barrier. So what was happening in those early conversations of me being a teacher was that I came to teaching thinking I was going to just solve a lot of problems, and what I was noticing that the problems weren't even being talked about, and so young men who were brilliant weren't being seen as brilliant because the way they're measured in school are based on your report card. And so since their report card is not doing good, they were seen as bad themselves. And so I was like, well, look, I'm either going to leave teaching or I got to figure this out. Now, I was a first-year teacher, but I was clear that I signed up to be broke. I knew that as a teacher I was going to be broke. That means poor financially. But I didn't sign up to be a failure. And so broke and a failure wasn't in my list of things that I had signed up to do in my life. So if I wasn't going to be successful, then I'm either going to go back to the money or I'm going to figure another way out. So I told these young men, I said, look, I'll buy you lunch once a week. In exchange for lunch, you're going to come and teach me how to be a better teacher. That's what the premise was. I know math. And I can learn something from teenagers, but I needed to learn from them, what was in the way of their brilliance not showing up on paper, not only in my class, but even in their other classes. So that's how it all started. And these lunchtime conversations began real deep, meaningful over food, right? It was everyone checks in when we eat and we check in. There was no curriculum. There was no. It was just I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think of an. If you told me at the time that I was starting a nonprofit, I would have laughed. I was like, you can't get more nonprofit than teaching. It's not even possible. But now as I look back, I'm like, oh yes, you can. You definitely can. It is possible to do that. But what I knew what I was doing in those lunch meetings was they were opening up. The football players and the kid who has never touched a football are in the same room. They're realizing they're going through similar stuff at home, but on the outside, no one sees it. And we weren't talking about masks back then, but the evolution of our work realized that all these young men were coming in every day with the masks they needed to wear. And our work was to let them see that they were more human than whatever they were telling them that they had to be. And if we could get on the common ground, then we could have deeper relationships. We could be more successful in school, and we can achieve our goals. And so that's how it started.
And now that was 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago. So, how do you think the boys that you're working with now, how are things different for them?
Yeah, so the model has changed a little bit. What we are definitely seeing, back then, if I needed to talk to a student, I would call their parents' phone number, maybe a mobile. Their parents had a mobile in 2004. But the parents would hand the phone to the young man. There's not much escaping. Now I call the young man's phone. I text them on their phone. It says delivered, right? WhatsApp says they last looked at this 12 minutes ago, right? I know they're on their phone, and they don't respond for days or complete weeks. So they have a lot more power now to evade your connection. Now, they're not running because maybe you're chasing them. They're running because they know you're going to ask them some hard questions. And if I ask you how you're doing and you say good, that's never enough. I'm always going to be like, well, tell me about good. You say, I'm fine, and what's about fine? So what we're seeing today more than ever, they have these powerful devices in their phone, and they have power. And that powerful device lets them keep you away as far as possible, unless you then call their parent and say, hey, he's not answering his phone. Can you pass the phone to him? And then if you have a relationship with the parent's like, yeah, let me get him. And then you can have a conversation. And then they're like, I'll call you on my phone. I'll call you on my phone. Because they don't want their parent to hear that they've been avoiding you, right? So what we just see is that the devices, as much as I love my phone, I know that it has created some easier places to communicate, and it has created a big gap in communication too.
Thank you. Mike, I wanted to ask about the research that you did that found that masculinity content came through algorithms a lot. Can you explain sort of how boys end up with this stuff in their feed?
Yeah. So when we ask boys specifically, we say, how does all this stuff surface for you, right? All the stuff about making money, about weapons, about dating advice, all of this stuff. More than 2/3 of them say that it's algorithmically driven. Like it's just showing up for them in their feeds or their YouTube videos, their recommendations, things like that. Only 1/4 of them say it's something that either they search for themselves or was shared with them. So much fewer instances of those kinds of things happening. So it's definitely something that is being normalized through the content that is getting served to them. And like I mentioned before, it's a mix of stuff. So when I was giving the description of all of the things that we include within that kind of digital masculinity bucket, it's not all necessarily bad. I mean, the stuff about making money or like building muscle, but maybe in the right context, without obsession or problematic behaviors associated with it, like could be considered to be like neutral, or there might be even some positive stuff in there. And in fact, there's certainly positive value that kids see in, for example, from some of the influencers and content creators that they follow. And if you ask them about it, they'll say that they look to them for inspiration, or they have been inspired by them. I think about 1/3 of them say that they've taken some advice, some practical advice from influencers. So these are things where they see value. Like if you're asking like why all of this stuff, like they will tell you like they are getting value out of these things. But I think the thing that concerns me, because so much of this is algorithmically driven, and one thing I didn't even touch on, just to build on Jason's point, is there's so much of it that's just about body image. 91% of kids said that they had gotten body image or body transformation content online, and for a lot of those kids said it made them think about like wanting to change their bodies. But that steady stream, that steady drip of digital masculinity content, I think makes it maybe seem that these messages are more of a norm than just, for example, just another post in their social media feed.
So I wanted to ask kind of a follow-up, I guess, to Ashanti and to Jason. You hear this report about algorithms and all the things that are coming into boys' lives through their phones or through their social media feeds, through YouTube. Does this resonate with what you're seeing, and how do you think it's affecting boys?
Yeah, I see it a lot. I personally see it. I spend a lot of time on my phone because I'm researching different topics around what's happening with young people. I'm watching kind of what's happening out there in the world, and I know that what I see, my personal self, is a heavy dose of things that are driven to keep you in the device. And I think that not only as an adult, a young brain. I didn't have a phone growing up, so imagine as an adult, if I found myself getting sucked in to a device that got me in there, I thought I was going to be in there 20 minutes. I was just looking for this post that I was looking for. An hour later, I'm like, there's no way an hour has passed in this time. And so I know that happening to me. So when I talk to young people about losing hours, they get it because they're experiencing it too. And I think with young people, sometimes they're when you ask them like what they're like, if I'm on a BART or something and I'm watching young people, I love to just people watch. Like I watch how quickly their thumbs are moving. They're not often stopping much time on anything. It's just kind of like boom, boom. They're doing do do do, and then boom, 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 and I'm like do do do, and I really just want to be like, tell me what you're doing, like. But I'm just really just watching, and I think I'm like. So here's what's happening. If young people are listening to messages out there in the algorithm based on sound bites, they're hearing 10, 20 seconds at a time, maybe even less. A lot of times I'm watching them, they don't stop for 25 seconds. Maybe they'll see a video and they'll watch for a little while. And my people watching part of what I see is there's an opportunity for us to recognize that when we try and sit them down for an hour to talk, they probably heard the first 20 seconds, and now they're just waiting for you to stop talking. Right? So oftentimes when I'm working with my mentors, I'm like, look, you don't have 30 minutes to talk to them. You got about 20, 30, 40 seconds, and you need to ask a question. You need to like shift it from input to a processing question so you can get some output. And if you are just thinking that you're going to sit them down and talk to them for an hour, good luck in whatever they're going to remember. So my work is like, not only as I'm training other mentors to work with young men, it's like, well, how long did you talk to them? Well, we were talking for at least 45 minutes. I'm like, oh. Okay, great. How many questions did you ask? I'm like, how many questions did you ask? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, I think that conversation probably didn't go too far. Because if you are sitting them down, recognizing that their attention span is short, then what we have to do is figure out how to reach them where they are. Obviously, we want them to be like it was back when we went to school. It ain't going to happen. Adults, parents, teachers, counselors, we ain't going back. And so, therefore, they are living in a world that we can't even imagine. You talk about a library, a Dewey Decimal System. You talk about all those things. They're like, what are you talking about? Now, maybe if you had a kid, you took him to the library, and that was your Saturday morning experience every day. But what I'm noticing with young people, definitely young men, is that a lot of times I'm asking them questions. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So I get realizing that I need to ask more questions. Oh, tell me what you are interested in. How do you do your homework? How do you do research? Like, what do you do when you see some scantily clad body on your phone? Like, what do you do? Do you look like, how do you see more of it? And we have real conversations around all those topics because they're going to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I don't want to bring up those topics, but I think what we learn in our young men's health groups, definitely in SFUSD and definitely other schools, young men are hungry to talk about things that they're curious about. Oftentimes, we don't make room for those conversations, especially when it doesn't fit in our lexicon of what we think the world should look like. And so because they don't want to be wrong, they'd rather just be silent. And so therefore, we hope that what they're catching out in the world is something healthy, and oftentimes it's not. Most of us live, I think I've heard Carla say this once before, most of us live on a cul-de-sac in a gated community of the internet. But there's 90% of the internet that is dark, dirty, evil, ugly. And most of us have no idea what that is. And so we could be upset about it, furious about it, but if we don't get curious about it, our young people are going to keep getting sucked out there, and it's going to be sometimes too hard for us to bring them back because we've not asked the right questions.
Thank you. And we heard this question or this sort of point about algorithms, Jason, and I heard some people reference the body image stuff that comes up on there with some specific terms, and I'm thinking specifically about this word bigorexia and another word called looks maxing. And I know this is sort of the area that you swim in. Can you tell us what the language here is referring to and what words people should know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just a quick point about the algorithms is that oftentimes the types of content and posts that get the most engagement, the most follows, or retweets, engagement are actually the most extreme behaviors, the biggest body transformations, the most muscular-looking images. Oftentimes, this could be like one of 100 photos in a photo shoot. There could be lots of filtering, and so we have young people who are already sensitive about their own puberty and growth, looking, it's normal development to be sort of comparing yourself as you're growing to other bodies, but now you're comparing yourself to like hyper extreme versions of the idealized version of computer modified bodies, which can lead to more body dissatisfaction. And so bigorexia is sort of the colloquial term, also known as reverse anorexia. The medical term is muscle dysmorphia. It's sort of called reverse anorexia because it occurs when an individual becomes obsessed with being muscular. It can sort of take over all of their behaviors, and in general, an individual may view themselves as puny or scrawny, even if objectively they have a normal or muscular body habitus. And one recent sort of online trend that promotes some of these extreme muscle or appearance behaviors, particularly for boys and men, is called looks maxing. And this is like the promotion of a very narrow and idealized version of masculinity that particularly emphasizes a square jawline, hunter eyes, a tall stature, and muscular build. And many influencers promote very specific behaviors to do this, some of which are very extreme, like there's a certain trend called bone smashing, which is actually breaking your facial bones to produce a more defined jaw. And then also it sort of promotes certain surgical interventions like leg lengthening surgery to become taller, or even jaw surgery to achieve some of these defined features. And I do think that sometimes the influencers are actually using this sort of like almost as a joke, like it's not actually meant to be realistic, but I do think that because it gets so much engagement, there are like case reports of individuals who've actually tried to smash their jaws or do some of these extreme contents. But certainly the muscle building supplements and steroid use and other sort of performance enhancing drugs are very common and easily accessible online.
Thank you. I know we're going to go to questions and answers in just a minute, but I did want to just make reference to another Common Sense report. So this study that Common Sense did over the summer was so big that it got split into 2 reports. So can you tell us about the second report called Betting on Boys?
Yeah, so the second report, this was also a national survey of boys between the ages 11 to 17, where we were interested in the kinds of gambling and the frequency of gambling behaviors and kind of attitudes towards gambling. And when we talk about gambling, we broke it into 3 main chunks. So one is like sports-related gambling, things like, betting on the Super Bowl, March Madness brackets, betting on daily fantasy apps, if you've heard of FanDuel or DraftKings, things like that. Another category was traditional sports betting, which is more along the lines of things that people might already typically associate with gambling, like playing poker or blackjack, online or offline, playing the lotto, often with family members, as it turns out. And then online gaming-related gambling. And this is the one that's probably the most unknown to parents, maybe the one they don't really think about, but shares so many characteristics of gambling that we call it gambling in the report. And these are things like, spending money on loot boxes within games. And for those who don't know what a loot box is, if you have a kid who plays Roblox or many other types of games, a loot box is something that you can buy within the game that you will get an item that might make you better, might make your character look different. And you might even know, like, if I spend $5, I'm going to get like a good loot box, but you don't know what's in that thing. So if you buy it and you don't get the thing that you want, then you could put another $5 in to get another loot box. What does that sound? It's like a slot machine, right? You just pull the handle and keep going. So it shares a lot of these characteristics. And what we found by looking at these different kinds of gambling is that it's pretty common, right? So a third of, actually more than a third, 36% of boys said they gambled in the last year. The most common type of gambling is that online gaming related gambling, which was surprising to me. I think I was expecting a little bit more to be in the sports bucket. But no, most kids said that they were spending money, or more kids said that they were spending money in those online gaming related environments. So I think it's just kind of important to acknowledge just how common it is, and real quick, because I know we are short on time, and just how prevalent it is in their feeds. So if you are a boy who gambles, you said you gambled in the last year, 50% of them, almost 50% of them, say they are seeing gambling-related content. This is part of that suite of digital masculinity content within their feeds. And also just generally, if you look at boys all around, 60% are seeing ads for gambling on YouTube, and the social media feeds, in live and streamed sporting events. Honestly, if you watch any sporting event right now, you can see there's tons of ads for different kinds of gambling-related products and platforms. If you watch the Super Bowl or the Golden Globes, like it is awash. So kids are awash in this. And similar to what I was saying about other digital masculinity content, it's just kind of so common now that it feels like it's becoming normalized. It makes it seem like it's more of just a thing that you do, like kids just gamble.
Yeah, and it does. I think the way that online betting is set up on apps looks so similar to the way gaming for kids is set up. It does almost feel like, oh, this is the training wheels for how to become a problem gambler later in life.
Yeah, and there is some research that shows that those kids who spend money, particularly who spend a lot of money on the online game, like things that have random rewards, chance-based rewards, is linked to later problem gambling later in life.
Thank you so much for that insight. We have time for some audience questions now, and I think we have some microphones that'll come around. So if you raise your hand, we'll have a mic come to you, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you for your panel. Quick question for the doctor. I'm seeing a lot of boys in 3rd grade, 4th grade who are interested in working out, building up their muscle, because some kids go through puberty, some boys go through puberty and get taller a lot earlier. What is your recommendation? I know they're talking to pediatricians, but they're not really at that age because they're in there with their parent. What is your recommendation on the markers when it's safe enough for kids to start working out with weights?
That's a great question. I think in general, I will say that in general, American boys on average don't get the recommended amount of physical activity. So I also don't want, while I think we want to be sensitive about some of these extremes, we also don't want to not promote exercise and physical activity. So I think in general, like a moderate amount of physical activity, being part of team sports or physical activity, PE at school is obviously very good and has many benefits for physical and mental health. So I do think that is something that I don't want anybody here to leave saying, oh, we should stop exercising for our boys. But I do think that, and I also will say that I think some of these pressures are more permeated for even younger kids. Some of the action figures that we're seeing with young boys, actually studies have shown that over the past 30 years, the muscles, the biceps, the triceps of Batman and Superman action figures have become larger in size. So I think these pressures are there. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. I do generally think that general physical activity and not focusing on the weights is good, especially elementary school, too young probably. I think when you're entering middle or high school, it could be considered, but again, to try really not to obsess about the weights and how much you're doing, and more being part of a team, getting outdoors, being active. So it's not I can't say exactly for that individual, but I think in general, elementary school is probably too young to be lifting weights, but promoting general physical activity, especially team and outdoor sports.
Hi, Ashanti, I love your Ever Forward Club. If we don't have something like that in our community, and we don't have a Girls on the Run for boys, and our sons won't go to see a therapist, and they won't talk to us, to whom should we send them to share their woes and open up?
Yeah, well, so we have an online community called the Brotherhood. So that's one space that we're trying to create, and it's tricky, right? Because it's not as exciting as their other social media places, right? But are you local Bay Area? Are you okay? So I would say that my card. I have a card that we're gonna all look at in a second. You can reach out to us. There are some organizations out there that are doing types of rites of passage work in communities all over the country. And sometimes they're small organizations, so they don't have a big social media following, and they don't have marketing and they don't have big flyers. But I think it's like, knowing you can look up your zip code in some of these areas. Mentor California has a great Finder website, part of their website. So there's lots of resources out there. Sometimes they're just not as funded, so that you're not going to be able to see them just all over the place. I would say in the conversation, if they're not having conversation with you, maybe those are the places you can just start and saying, how can we begin bringing around you that right network? Maybe there's already people, men in the community you already look up to or you already feel are honorable, and you can say, hey, are you willing to have lunch with my son or something, right? So finding those people that they trust, that you trust, that you can begin just putting around them other men that have values that you also respect. I think those are really things that parents can do. But I think having those, starting with the conversation around the mask, which I'm going to invite you to do in a second, is a great way to just start a conversation that hopefully will lead to a deeper experience with them.
Ashanti and I work together on running social emotional groups in San Francisco schools. So we do groups for boys in middle and high schools. And it's a small program, but it's been very effective. And we really the only limitation on the growth for that kind of project is funding. So I think we would like to have more of those groups in San Francisco schools. But I talk about this kind of project a lot. And I've had other parents in other places say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. We're going to start a boys group in our school. And I've got to tell you, it is not a high barrier for entry. It is something that you don't have to have a PhD in gender studies to run a boys group in a school. You have to be somebody who will show up regularly, who cares about kids, who can be reliable. We love to have men doing this work. I think there's a real big space for that. But it is something that is totally doable. You can look at models from Ever Forward Club, from Next Gen Men has a great curriculum called Next Gen Mentors that's free online for how to run a group. This is something that I would love to see in every school, a social emotional group for boys.
Okay. I first thank you to Common Sense Media for picking this as a topic. It's super relevant. We also seeing, as you guys are talking about, that boys are disenfranchised from schools starting very young, disenfranchised from society. And then like the graduating class for the last few years has been 40-60, 40% boys, 60% girls. So, for people to internalize what the issue is. My question to you is, girls, there's been a lot of focus on girls, and girls are doing better in education. Still lots of work needs to happen. How does the fact that the girls are starting to show this upward trajectory, does that impact the boys as well? Is that showing up as some effect on the boys?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it shows up in lots of ways. I think one way it shows up is that there are lots of people out on these devices that are telling your son that they're not getting into college because it's the girl's fault. So what's happening is sometimes they're using it towards a negative as opposed to just understanding that you got to do your homework. You know what I'm saying? No, you didn't take the SATs. You know what I'm saying? What are you talking about? Like, how are you upset? Like, I think what they're doing is they're using these things that are happening. There's definitely been lots of programs that provided resources for girls. When I started the Ever Forward Club, people were like, the boys have everything. That's what the girls were saying in my school. The boys have everything. Why are you starting a program for them? We want our own program, right? And I was like, well, maybe they have everything, but they're not talking about how they feel. You gladly tell me how you feel regularly. These girls in my class, I need to buy them some food to get them to tell me how they feel, right? So it was kind of like I needed to do something different than what they needed compared to what the girls needed. And so I think it's helping us not let boys get sucked into a narrative that makes them believe that you are losing. Like there's room for everyone at the table, but I think that oftentimes these people who are making a lot of money on these devices, selling them a program for $19.95 a month, are telling them it's the girl's fault. So you better never be a simp. You never be weak. You better never buy her flowers. You better make her buy you flowers. Like there's people out there who are giving young men these messages. So what I would say is the messages is sadly it's being used against girls that they're doing well. And I think we need to work with our boys to give them tools of navigating their with their wellness.
Thank you. I want to hear from each of our panelists for a last word. And my question is, what is one thing that you would like everyone here to do for boys? And Mike, we'll come to you first.
Can I steal yours? Are you going to do one? Because I thought the be curious, not furious, like I say it a lot, but the be curious, not furious, which means having that 1 minute open-minded dialogue where it's not a space of judgment, where you just hear what your son, your boy in your life is interested or wants to talk about, I think is just a perfect way to strengthen the parent-child bond or the adult-child bond and get the information you need to have the future conversations. So.
Great.
That's what
Thank you. Jason, what's something you wish everyone here would do for boys?
Yeah, building off that point, I do think that we focused a lot on potential harms, but I do think that media spaces for boys and men are not inherently bad, and masculinity is not inherently toxic. But I do think that there are gaps in the online spaces for really high-quality content for boys and men that we should aim to fill, content that promotes connection and provides positive male role models, and also that supports mental health and well-being.
Thank you. I love that idea. And we're going to take a couple minutes at the end here because as you sat down, you probably saw that there's a postcard on your seat, and Ashanti is going to tell us about that postcard in this activity.
Yeah, so we're running out of time, and some of you are heading to your next thing, but please take the card with you. There's a box on the table outside also.
We've got 5 minutes.
Oh, we got time. Okay. So what I would like you to do is, this is a 3-step process. This is anonymous. This is the Million Mask Movement. This is what we created after we were featured in the documentary, The Mask You Live In. There's no name on it. It doesn't even ask for a name, but any information you want to share, we would love to have you fill this out. There's 3 steps. Draw 1 picture, write 6 words. Draw 1 picture, write 6 words. So if you look at the card, the left side says front of mask. And I give you 2 so you can take 1 home and do it with somebody, or there's some other extra ones outside if you need extras, but I would love you to make 1 here and leave it here. Either hand it to me before you walk out, or there's a box on the table outside, you can drop it in the box. So the left side, front of mask, is what are 3 things about yourself that you gladly let the world see? What are 3 qualities, characteristics, things about yourself that you like to talk about, you gladly let people see? Write those on the left side. On the left side, front of mask. And then for the back of mask, it's the other stuff. 3 things you don't normally talk about. Now, maybe as you notice what you're feeling right now, maybe some of you have the resistance hat on right now. You're like, I ain't doing that. What are you talking about? I don't know this guy, right? But just know that every time we ask our sons how they're doing, we are expecting them to be giving us answers from the back of the mask, but we are knowing that they're probably just giving us answers from the front of the mask.
We use this activity in our boys groups, in every boys group that we do. We use this activity, and it seems incredibly simple. And the instructions don't take a long time to give out. I've got to tell you, this activity is very effective at getting the people who we think are hardest to reach, like teenage boys who come in tough and kind of with their guard up. This is very effective at getting them to let their guard down and be a little bit vulnerable and actually connect with other people in the same room, even if they have some differences with those people. So very effective, very simple exercise.
And so that box will be out there for the rest of the day, and then or if you want to hand it to me at some point, here's what I also challenge you to do or invite you to do. Sometime in the next 24, 48 hours, the young person in your life, whether it's a young man, a young woman, a student that may not identify in the binary, a cousin you haven't talked to in a long time, contact them, ask them how they're doing. When they respond to you by text or by phone, when they answer with, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm great, how are you? I want you to just slow it down, and I want you to say, I just want you to know that if you're ever not good or fine or great, that I'm here for you. Because maybe the permission that we have been wanting is not to burden them with our stuff, so we don't tell them how we're really doing, and they don't want to burden us with their stuff, so they don't tell us how they're really doing, and we're all protecting each other's, but we're actually not getting what we really need. And that's what this tool is about. It's like, if I could just anonymously first start with this. If you want to make your mask online, if you're a digital person, you can scan that, millionmask.org. You can make your mask online, submit it anonymously. We have a goal of reaching 1 million people around the world. We're about to hit 100,000. We got a long way to go. I'm a math teacher. I know. I've counted. Like it's a long way to go. But every one mask helps us recognize that we're not alone. There's more to me than you can see. And thank you all for listening to me. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to our panel.